So I get a gloat this morning because I said all off season, I said, I think Kirk Cousins is the kind of personality he needs support. So, he got drafted behind RG3. He didn't feel loved there. He goes to Minnesota. They have a defensive coach. He doesn't feel necessarily loved. And my takeaway was yesterday, it looked like he spent the offseason getting some love from the coach. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll tell you, we were really impressed when we had a chance to talk with Kevin O'Connell, the new head coach. We talked to Kirk Cousins first on the production calls. Then we talked to Kevin. And I'll tell you, just hearing them both kind of compliment one another, and not necessarily like the rah-rah stuff, but just as far as the approach and how aligned they were and the things they needed to understand. Kirk said, listen, we were pretty good here on offense. And Kevin O'Connell didn't just come in and say, hey, nothing you did in the past. We're done with all that. This is a new show. He said they've worked collaboratively since day one, brought a lot of the stuff with him from LA, but also kept a lot of the things that him and Justin Jefferson had a ton of success on. So I think their relationship got off to a really good start. I think that was obvious yesterday. My concern going into the game, and they answered this very quickly, anytime you have a new regime, new philosophy, new coaching staff, there's usually a learning curve, especially with how limited people take the preseason nowadays. But that was hardly the case. I mean, they jumped out of the gates, opening drive, touchdown. Justin Jefferson looks better than he ever looked, which is hard to believe. I'm really impressed with that Kirk Cousins, Kevin O'Connell relationship. They got weapons all over the place. I tell you, what they did yesterday, week one, new regime, new staff. It's pretty impressive.
So listen, I said, you've got kids, I've got kids. When you have kids, they make mistakes. You have to be patient. Like it becomes like an assignment as a dad. I have to be patient. So Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, they're kids. They're going to have drops. I mean, think about this. They come from small colleges. Their first pro game is an in-division rival on the road. And you were in that stadium. That is one of the 5 loudest places on the earth for a football game. And it's like, yeah, Christian Watson dropped it. And Romeo Doubs miscommunication. What bothered me was, Aaron, don't ghost him until the second half. Like, come right back to him. This is hard. And I know I come across as Mr. Negative with Aaron, but it's like you got to bake in patience with kids from small schools that come to the NFL. Peyton Manning told me last week, he goes, there's preseason speed, there's regular season speed, there's division game speed. And I'm like, of course they're going to make mistakes. Doesn't Aaron have to understand? This is what it's going to look like. You got to put your arms around some of these mistakes.
Yeah, and I think he will. I think Aaron knew going into that game just the little bit of the learning curve and a little bit of the stuff he was going to have to deal with. I think what makes Aaron so unique and so special is that perfectionist mindset, right? He does not accept mediocrity from anyone, himself included, of anyone around him. So I do think there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve there, a little bit of an adjustment. I'm sure he'll do some kind of self-reflecting and say, hey, yeah, they made mistakes. Yeah, they're not doing it exactly the way I need it to be done, but I do need to put my arm around them. We talked about that a little bit on the broadcast. I agree. I thought maybe LaFleur and Aaron would have tried to come back a little quicker after the drop on the first play with Watson. But, listen, Aaron made no mistakes about it. When we talked to him, he's been very vocal in the press. The standard of these two young receivers that they're going to be held to, in his words, are just different than any standard we've put on a rookie receiver since I've been here. And that's because we don't have time. We don't have Devontae Adams for them to learn behind. Yesterday, they're missing Allen Lazard, who they're hoping can fill some of that Devontae Adams void. So they don't have a ton of time for these guys to get up to speed, but there is some sort of balance they need to find where they are rookies. They are going to have their learning curve and their growing pains. But that first play was kind of just, it summed up how the rest of the game was going to go. Everything was hard. Everything was kind of off kilter. And we're just not used to seeing an Aaron Rodgers, Matt LaFleur offense look like that outside of week one last year. So I think that's where people need to just keep it together, right? The RELAX, the relax thing from, that Rodgers was famous for years back. Like, they're going to figure it out. Week one was not what they wanted, but I don't think we write them off just yet.
So I watched, as a kid that grew up in Washington State and played in rain, I love rain games. And so, the Bears and the Niners was a mess. But here's where I'll give Justin Fields credit. First of all, not a great offensive front. He was running a lot, but he mostly avoided contact. He understood. Sometimes Trey Lance would put his head down and burrow into guys. And I'm like, whoa. This is not FCS football, bro. You cannot do that. So I thought Justin did a good job to kind of avoid potential disasters. The other thing was a lot of their offense was Justin making plays. Play breaks down off script. And his numbers aren't great. But I thought Justin had a certain self-awareness in the game. Like he knew, okay, we're getting breakdowns. I'm only going to get 2 or 3 big throws in this game against this defense. And even though their numbers are very similar, I thought Justin played, in my opinion, late. Now it's late. Everybody's throwing different stuff at you late. You haven't practiced this stuff, right? These aren't the plays that you came into the game with. I thought Justin Fields was kind of a gamer. I was impressed late with him. Your thoughts?
Yeah, we were able to catch a little bit of that game, waiting for our kickoff. To go back real quick, why do you like rain games?
Because I grew up in Washington State, and it rained in almost all of them.
I guess you just had no choice, I guess. I despised rain games. There was nothing worse to me. I'd rather play in minus 20. I'd rather play in 160 degrees. When it rained, I hated it. My gloves were wet. My feet were wet. You couldn't stay. The ball was wet. Everything sucked. I don't necessarily agree with that point. I agree with you on a lot of things. That's one we're going to have to agree to disagree. But anyway, back to your point. That field yesterday was insane. It's like it's never held water before. I've never seen water puddle quite like that in a game where they're actually squeegeeing a natural grass field. That was pretty interesting to watch. But, I caught some of the game. We caught it in bits and pieces as we were prepping for our call. But I agree. I got to see Fields a couple times last year. I got to see his debut, which was
That's right.
an absolute disaster in Cleveland. And then I got to see him later in the year, and there was tremendous progress, right? He made a ton of progress as the year went on. We had him when they lost to the Packers, when Rodgers did the I own you thing to the fans. So we were there for a little bit of that evolution last year. So now to see him start out and just learn how to win. Not all wins in the NFL are going to look the same. They're not all going to be pretty. Weather, the environment in which you're operating in, so I think for him to go and beat Trey Lance head to head, to come out looking better, like you said, the stats weren't great. The play wasn't, I know the first half, I think they had like 5 yards passing, but he found a way to do just enough, keep his team in the game, manage the elements, and find a way to win. Again, I don't know how many people expect great things out of the Bears. As you said, they're kind of personnel wise, they're they're kind of rebuilding and growing that from the base up. But if they can continue to get winning play, it doesn't have to be MVP play. If they can get winning play out of Justin Fields and everyone around him, I think with Eberflus and that new staff, I think they can at least be competitive. I don't know if anyone's saying they're going to challenge for the division or challenge for the conference, but I think they can be competitive if he can just kind of keep more in lines of like he did yesterday.
So one of the things I noticed over the weekend, and you could experience this because they asked you to block, is that we don't play starters in the preseason anymore. It's very obvious. So the offensive line play was awful in a lot of spots. And to me, that's a direct correlation to that's the ultimate unit that needs work. Like if you can run a route, Justin Jefferson can run a route, he can run a route. A corner can go. But O-line is different. Go back to your career. Was the preseason valuable? Because O-lines now, starters don't play. And I thought O-line play yesterday was awful throughout most of the league.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think the biggest challenge that you face is no matter how much the coaches try to make practice game-like, it's still different. Guys are conscious. So specifically with the offensive and defensive line, every single coach emphasizes stay off the ground. Don't go to the ground in practice. We don't want guys falling into each other and hurting one another and having injuries. So in order to stay off the ground, can you go 10 on a scale of 1 to 10? Are you pass rushing 10? Are you coming off the ball 10? You're conscious of your feet. You're conscious of where guys are on the ground. So there is an element, even if you think this is full speed, practice just is not quite the game. You mentioned, Peyton's kind of quote there about the different levels of play. And then playoffs is even more than that. So there are different levels of play, whether guys consciously understand it or not. When you get into the game, the stunts are happening faster. The pressures are coming with more intensity. The pick twists, the double teams, you're getting guys low at your legs. There's just more going on when it's full live speed. So, yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think that's a big challenge where guys struggle without the preseason. My biggest reason why I always tried to play at least a series or two in the preseason, I wanted to catch a ball and I wanted to be tackled, right? I didn't want the first time I was tackled after a catch to be week 1. I wanted to get it out of my system. I wanted to be hit hard. I wanted to be taken to the ground. I wanted to get up, give the ball to the official, get back in the huddle and say, all right, I'm ready to do this again. So there's a mental component to playing those early preseason games where you just kind of check a couple boxes. And now mentally, going into week one, I'm ready. I've done all my prep. I've done the mental prep. I've had a great off season of training. I'm healthy. I've gotten tackled. I've gotten hit low. Whatever the things are for your position, we're seeing, to your point, where I think a lot of this preseason inexperience and guys being careful leads to some early struggles, at least offensively, when you get into the real game.
Greg Olsen, great work yesterday. Fun game to watch, my man. Love having you here, and we'll talk next week if we can.
All right, you got it. Thanks, Colin.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.